All right, so many participants. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Miriam K, and it is my pleasure today to host the virtual lecture, Fire in Their Heart, Women in the Holocaust. These virtual lectures are free and available not just to Rhodes Scholar participants, but are available to anyone who loves to learn, so spread the word. This series of online lectures is critical to helping us pursue our not-for-profit mission of making learning accessible to as many lifelong learners as we can, including those with limited physical abilities and a lack of financial means. Ultimately, this series would not be possible without the support of viewers like you who have funded this series through generous donations. Please consider making a donation to not-for-profit Rhodes Scholar so that we can continue to provide educational experiences, both in the virtual classroom and our learning adventures around the world in the future. Visit www.rhodesscholar.org/give to show your support with a donation. Every dollar helps. So while the Rhodes Scholar headquarters are based in Boston, we have offices and staff around the world. Today, you'll be hearing from Dr. Miriam Kassenoff. Dr. Kassenoff was born in present-day Slovakia in 1941, where she lived with her parents and infant brother before fleeing the Holocaust. Dr. Kassenoff is the founding director of the University of Miami Holocaust Teacher Institute and the education specialist for Holocaust Studies for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. She's responsible for training educators on teaching the Holocaust in schools. She also frequently presents on Holocaust education at conferences and workshops nationwide and has consulted on several documentary films about the time period. Now, before we begin, I have a few quick notes. Dr. Kassenoff will present for approximately 40 minutes, after which we will host a 10 to 15-minute question and answer session. During this session, you can submit questions using the question and answer icon at the bottom of your screen. Afterwards, I'm going to read a few questions live for Dr. Kassenoff to answer. Now, there are several hundred of you, I believe just over 800 on last count, that are going to be watching live today. So apologize if we are not able to get to your question, but we will certainly try our best to get through as many as possible. Should technical issues force you to miss a portion of the webinar, don't worry, we'll be adding a recording of the lecture online to our virtual lecture library. Finally, at the end of the Q&A and our time together, you'll be prompted to take a short survey, just like on a Rhodes Scholar program. We ask that you please take a few moments to fill out your survey and know that your feedback is immensely helpful to us as we grow and improve our virtual lecture series. So without further ado, let's have a warm virtual welcome for Dr. Miriam Kassenoff.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey and Matthias. I welcome all participants who viewed my last talk about my family and I escaping the Holocaust, and thank you for your very lovely comments that you all sent to me. If you missed that particular talk, please search under my name on the Rhodes Scholar website. I personally love Rhodes Scholar and ask that you support the organization. I discovered the trips last summer when I went to Chautauqua, and I certainly plan to go again, as well as hopefully joining a trip to Portugal from where I escaped in 1941. As you see in front of you, all my presentations are in memory of my family, survivors of the Holocaust who inspired me. So on the upper left, you see my father, the late Rabbi of Temple Emmanuel in Miami Beach, my mother, Sarah Klein, my brother, Ted Klein, federal judge Ted Klein, and the picture on the lower right is my mother right before she passed at the age of 99, attending one of my Holocaust Teacher Institutes. I am the only one left of this small family. I call my talk Women in the Holocaust, Fire in My Heart, because one has to have that fire to do what these women did, to resist, to rebel, to rescue. Why am I doing a talk on women? Because over the past 20 or 25 years that I have been teaching the Holocaust, researching the Holocaust, presenting on the Holocaust, one of the experiences I've had that has affected me a great deal is that I kept meeting wonderful women who told me their stories. And I couldn't believe that these stories had not been documented or passed on or told. And so over the years, I wrote down each one of their stories and prepared this slide presentation for the teachers that I teach at my Holocaust Teacher Institute at the University of Miami. And then I found out that people beyond the teachers were also interested. So I refined the presentation and I actually found voices of each one of the survivors so that this is an interactive presentation of not only the actual text story of each woman, but then a short clip of film. I'm not sure that I will get through all of them because of time limits, but let's begin. Jewish women performed truly heroic deeds during the Holocaust. They faced unthinkable peril and upheaval, traditions upended, spouses that were already sent to the death camps. They themselves were torn from their roles as caregivers and pushed into the workforce, there to be humiliated and abused. Yet, in the face of danger and atrocity, they bravely joined the resistance movement. They smuggled food into the ghettos, and they made wrenching sacrifices to keep their children alive. Their courage and compassion continue to inspire us to this day. If you want to find out more about this subject, you can take a picture with your camera. I recommend all of these authors and their books. Plus, there is a website, rememberthewomen.org. So, what exactly was the Holocaust? Here is a quick definition by the United States Holocaust Museum. Please take a picture with your camera. Since the focus of this talk is resistance and rescue, what does resistance mean? Well, resistance in the Nazi Holocaust by the Jews was to smuggle a loaf of bread, to teach in secret, to cry out warning and shatter illusions, to rescue a Torah scroll, to forge documents, to smuggle people across borders, chronicle events and conceal the records, hold out a helping hand to the needy, contact those under siege and smuggle weapons, fight with weapons in street forests and mountains, rebel in the death camps, rise up in the ghettos among the crumbling walks in the most desperate of revolt. So the first woman I want to introduce you to is Professor Yafa Aliyah. She was and is, unfortunately, she passed a couple years ago, a pioneering scholar in Holocaust studies. Many people do not realize that the first course and documentation of Orthodox Jewish people after the Holocaust was done by a woman, Professor Yafa Aliyah. When she was only 4 in 1941, Polish mobs in sympathy with Nazis began murdering Jews in her town of Ajashak. She actually witnessed the murder of her own mother and her brother. She then survived and went into hiding as a small child with a Polish Catholic family. Ultimately, she ended up in Israel with a group of children, went to the Israeli army and to a college there where she met David Aliyah. They both came to America. David is still living. He is a rabbi. And Yafa started with a doctorate, the Holocaust Education Program of Brooklyn College. She wrote many things. One of them is Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust, but her most well-known book is There Once Was a World, a 900-year chronicle of the shtetl, small city of Asia Shock, for which she won or was a finalist for the National Book Award. Also, if you have been to the United States Holocaust Museum in Washington and have seen the room there, which is the Tower of Faces, that was something Yafa created. She had taken all the photographs that she had, that she could find after the war from Asia Shock, and she donated them, and thus the Tower of Faces. So for just a minute, let's play
TorahCafe.com.
When the Germans entered the town of Aishashuk, slaughtering the residents, a group of 29 Jews escaped by being sheltered in the homes of Christian Poles. Local partisans eventually freed the town of German rule. The Jews returned to their homes on October 20th, 1944. Shortly after, they were attacked by a mob of anti-Semitic Poles.
4-year-old Yafa Eliach was downstairs sleeping in bed
When the Poles entered and shot her mother and baby sister.
After the war, there was definitely a great pain and most of all anger. People felt that nobody knows who they are, from where they came, what their families were all about.
Eliach decided that the only way to move forward was not by cataloging the hatred, but by recapturing the beauty of Jewish life that had been destroyed.
and I'm stopping it there, but if you want to see the rest of that, please Google Torah Cafe. And I'm stopping at the line where he said, not driven by hatred, but by cataloging what life was like before the Holocaust for the Jews. She also wrote this poem that we often let our students look at and then discuss. So now I want to tell you about Nechama Tech because I think you'll be really interested in her. Nechama Tech's interest in rescue and resistance is rooted in her experience as a hidden child in German-occupied Europe. She was born in Lublin, and she lived for 3 years during the war under assumed Christian identity. Her sister and her parents also survived by hiding in homes and evading German detection with the help of Polish Catholics. Immediately after the war, Nechama was determined to put her Holocaust experiences behind her. In 1950, she married a child psychiatrist and immigrated to the United States. She embarked on a career in academia, earning her doctorate degrees in sociology from Columbia University. When I first met Nechama, we were having lunch about 20 years ago, and I said, "What are you up to these days?" And she said, "Well, there's a fascinating story that very few people know, and it's about the Tubia Bielski family, who were from near the edge of a forest in Lithuania. And it seems that this family of 3 boys had decided that they were not going to actually they were from Belarusia, that they were not going to go like lamb to slaughter. And so they decided that they would, in the forest nearby, develop a group and be rescuers. Whenever they heard that a Jew was trying to escape from their shtetl or their home, they knew the word had gotten around that if they could find the group of the Bielski partisans, then they would be saved. Ultimately, there were 1,200 Jews saved by the three brothers, Tuvia, Zeus, and Asael. This story would be familiar to you if you look at the movie Defiance with Daniel Craig, and it's based on the book that Nahama Tech wrote. Here is a picture of Bielski partisans. There were weddings, there were so many things that happened among this group, and many of them survived. Let me show you one.
Camera, the original camera that I have since 1939. This camera, I took pictures when the Russians occupied, I took pictures when the Nazis occupied, and I took pictures in the partisans. This camera was buried in the ground many times when I was in the partisans and I was attacked and I was on assignment. And many times I took the camera out and it still works. And the same camera, all my pictures that I took was all with this particular camera. It's I would never like to part as long as I live with this camera. So many memories and so many stories and so many things happened. And this camera have seen everything. Every picture almost has it's a story what to tell. And all the stories are my memories. So I cannot really separate one from another. Just the one that before the war that I made before that I colored myself when I was young. That's my favorite picture, and the favorite picture is good that I have the whole family before killing.
Living in the partisans, to me, it was like a picnic already after what we went through before the partisans. The partisan life was actually very good for us because living by ourselves in the forests and hungry and wet and not being able to get any clothes or to wash ourselves for a whole year. We did not wash ourselves. And the water, we had to dissolve the snow in order to get a little bit of water. And if we baked a little bit of bread and we brought it back to the forest, we hung it up, we left it on the ground. The animals ate it. So we used to hang it on top of the trees in order to preserve it. It was difficult. My legs were burned completely because it was so cold. When you sat in front of the fire, I did not feel when my flesh was burning, my legs. It was a horror. But when we came to the partisans, to me, that was a good life. I was not alone. And if I was going to die, I was going to die as a fighter, not because I was born a Jew. I was going to die as a fighter. And that kept us going.
So I'm going to stop there for a minute because I want you to digest the last testimony. If she was going to die, she was going to die as a fighter. And that kind of answers that question that people always ask, why didn't Jews fight back? Why did they go like lamb to slaughter? When they could not go fight back, of course, they couldn't in many instances. But when they could, they resisted and they fought hard. I'd love you to meet Gerda Weissman-Klein. She is not a relative. I wish she were. She's a very well-known Holocaust survivor. I believe she's about 94 right now. After surviving hard labor and terrible conditions in the camps, the Nazis forced her to join a 350-mile death march with other weak and sick prisoners. They even locked her up into a church barn to be burned when this happened.
My very clear view of freedom and liberation came that morning when I stood in this doorway of that abandoned factory. And I saw a car coming down the hill. And the reality of that came when I saw the white star on its hood and not the swastika. There were two men in that car. One jumped out.
I saw some skeletal figures trying to get some water from a hand pump, but over on the other side, leaning next to against the wall, next to the entrance of the building, I saw a girl standing, and I decided to walk up to her.
I remember that aura of that awe, of the disbelief in daylight, to really see someone who fought for our freedom, for my ideals. And he looked like God to me.
And I asked her in German and in English whether she spoke either language, and she answered me in German.
And I knew what I had to say. And I said to him, we are Jewish, you know. For a very long time, at least to me it seemed very long, but he didn't answer me. And then his own voice betrayed his emotion. He was wearing dark glasses, I couldn't see his eyes. He said, so am I.
I asked about her companions.
He said, may I see the other ladies? A form of address we hadn't heard for 6 years. I told him that most of the girls were inside. They were too ill to walk. And he said to me, won't you come with me? I didn't know what he meant. So he held the door open for me and let me precede him. And that was the moment of restoration, of humanity, of humaneness, of dignity, of freedom.
We went inside the factory. It was an indescribable scene. There were women scattered over the floor on scraps of straw, some of them quite obviously with a mark of death on their faces.
I took him to see my friends.
The girl who was my guide made sort of a sweeping gesture over this scene of devastation and said the following words: "Noble be man, merciful and good." And I could hardly believe that she was able to summon a poem by the German poet Goethe, which is called The Divine, at such a moment. And there was nothing that she could have said that would have underscored the grim irony of the situation better than what she did.
And this first young American of Liberation Day is now my husband. He opened not only the door for me, but the door to my life and my future.
I really love that story. There's an American Jewish soldier who liberates a Jewish woman who thought her life was going to end any minute. And ultimately, they were married and traveled all over the world telling their story. Unfortunately, on one trip to Panama, Kurt had a heart attack. And so now Goethe survives, telling her story still without him. I wanted to introduce you to Rosa Rabota, because very few people know that there were women who actually tried to blow up a crematorium. So Rosa Rabota was an underground activist in Auschwitz-Birkenau. She was a member of the Birkenau, which is the adjoining camp of Auschwitz, where all the murder really happened. Sonderkommando. The Sonderkommandos were the Jews that were picked by the Nazis to actually clean up the bodies. Yes, they picked Jews to clean up fellow Jews. They worked in a factory. She and Oleg Gertner recruited 2 other women, and because they had access to explosives in the factories in Birkenau, they gave all they could steal to Gertner, who then passed it on to Roboto, who then gave it to the Sonderkommando members who were actually working the gas chambers. Of course, the Nazis discovered them. They arrested and interrogated the 4 women and condemned them for stealing explosive. They went to the gallows on January 6, 1945. The Nazis led them out and made them stand on folding chairs. Nooses were put around their necks. As the chairs pulled away, leaving them suspended, Rosa's last word was Nekama, revenge. Be strong, have courage, revenge.
Because they say that the Jewish people went to death like lambs to slaughter, I have to bring this up. One Saturday there was again the siren sounding and strength the Blocksperre, and all of a sudden we were all in the block. That was during the day, and all of a sudden we heard shooting and shooting and shooting and a terrible explosion. And what happened was that the Sonderkommando, which only consisted of Jewish men, you know what Sonderkommando was? They exploded a crematorium. They made a revolt, an uprising. They cut the wires and they all ran away. They all ran away, and I think one crematorium exploded in the one that was used mostly, the one the closest I think to the camp was exploded, you know. And unfortunately, we heard later on that they were all recaptured. After that, we were still in camp, and I forgot to tell you that while I was working in camp, how this uprising came all about was there was a young woman working in the Kleidungskammer whose name was Rosa Robota. And this Rosa Robota with 3 other girls was smuggling dynamite to the men. That's how the uprising came all about. These girls were, it was a whole operation. They were taking the dynamite from a Jewish women who were working in a munition factory. And it took them maybe 12 months. Little by little, they smuggled the powder, the dynamite, to the men, powder by powder, you know? It took them a long time in the hems of their frocks everywhere, you know?
And Rosa Robota did this.
Rosa Robota and 3 other girls. One was Ala Gertner. The other 2 girls' names I don't know. There was a whole lot of people involved in it. And that Rosa Robota was caught.
Was she a friend of yours?
Yes. We were working together in the Kleidungskammer. Although she was older than I was, we became very friendly. She was a very lovely girl. She was in her maybe 20. Very idealistic and a great Zionist, and she was always telling me that how, if she ever survived, she will live in Palestine, which was Palestine there, not Israel. And she was telling me always, you will see one day we'll pay them back. We will pay them back, we'll do something, we'll do something. She always used to tell me that, you know. And that was the uprising.
So it's amazing to be able to actually hear in her own words about that story. I'd now like to introduce you to a fabulous woman, the laundry worker who saved Jews. It was July 1943 when Irene worked in a laundry in Poland. She had made a number of Jewish friends. The German major in charge of the laundry had medical problems, and Irene cooked for him. Because of her position with the major, Irene learned about the actions against the ghetto, and so she could get passes so her friends could use to leave the ghetto before the Germans conducted raids. But days before the ghetto was to be liquidated, the major asked Irene to be his housekeeper. She realized then that she now had a place to hide her friends in the major's villa. One day, he returned home early and he found 12 Junes that Irene had hidden in the basement. He was furious and said that he had a price for her doing that. She had to be his mistress. She had no choice. Let's hear it in her own words.
At that time, I worked serving breakfast, luncheons, and dinner to the German officers and secretaries. But only one thing. Behind that hotel, there was a ghetto. And I first time realized what was happening to the Jewish people. I did see the death march. They pushed them like cattle through the middle of town. I did see old men look to me like rabbi with a white beard, white hair, and most of all, the children, all sizes, all ages. The little one was screaming, crying, "Mama, Mama!" And the bigger one, they were even scared to cry. On one thing I remember, the eyes, a big, scary, looking, searching, like asking, what did I do? What did I do? So then I pray and promise I will help. Then the plant did have to move farther to Tarnopol. There I did the same work, serving breakfast, luncheons, and dinner to the officers, secretaries, and also the local head of Gestapo. I spoke quite good German, and serving, I was able to overhear conversation. And the major gave me another job to take care of the laundry for the officers. There I met 12 Jewish people. We become good friends. But when the time came for the total liquidation of ghetto, those 12 did not have place to go. And you know, next day in the morning, the major called me to his office and he said, "Irene, I would like you to be my housekeeper." Well, when I did go see the villa, the Lord made a decision. I mean, without planning or doing anything more. I put those 12 in the cellar and kept them there. And in September, I was in town. And all of a sudden, the Gestapo was pushing the whole people from the street to the marketplace. And there, we did have to witness Polish family be hung together with the Jewish family, middle of the market street. And we did have to stay and watch to be a warning what happened when you befriended a Jew. When I came home, I locked the door like I do usually, but I usually leave the key turned in a lock, so if the major would come unexpectedly, he could not open. But I was so shocked up. So I locked the door. I even locked it, but I pulled the key. I came to the kitchen, and there were Ida, Fanka, Clara, Miriam. The women came out, because that's what they usually did, to help me. I was white like a snow, so they asked me what's happened. I said, nothing, I don't feel good. I could not tell them. What could they do? We're talking and the door opened and the major was standing in front of us. I still can see his chin shaking, his eyes with unbelief, and we were all frozen like statues. And he turned around in silence and he walked to his office. I did have to go and face him. There was no any other way. He yelled at me, said, Irene, how could you do it? I trust you. I give you such a nice home, protection. Why? I said, I know only one thing. They're my friends. I did have to do it. I did not have a home to take them to my home. I don't have a family. Forgive me, but if I would do it again, so nobody has right to kill and murder because of religion or race. He said, you know what can happen to you? I said, yes, I know, I just witnessed. By the time I was crying, you know, I could hardly talk. And he said, yes, I witnessed that. And he said to me, look, I cannot do that to you. I cannot just let you die. And when he said that, believe me, I kneel down and I kiss his hand. Not for me, but for those people. They were alive and they did have hope.
So I had the distinct pleasure of having Irene speak to my teachers and students here in Miami Beach, Florida, before she passed. In her later years, she was broke financially and in desperate straits. And so at least one of the people that she saved that was still living found the rest of the group, and they all pitched in to make sure that her last years were taken, she was well taken care of in a assisted living facility, and that she would not be alone. There are so many wonderful stories, but because of time, I have to move on. And so I really wanted to show you one more about Gentile rescue. This is one of my favorite stories, and I wanted to show this to you before my time is up.
Lived under Hitler's occupation for 5 years. A small, brave rescue network once operated.
This is in Belgium.
Its cobblestone streets remember the March of Jackboots and whispering Nazi collaborators. Led by town council members, a small band of ordinary people engaged in the dangerous task of hiding Jews. Before it was over, every municipal official who had lent a hand was dragged off to the death camps. But they were the kind who preferred such a fate to passiveness in the face of enormous crime.
We knew the danger that was involved, and we were very, very careful. Even my father-in-law, who was visiting every day, never knew about it because I was afraid that one word will get out and glue the whole thing.
Germaine Beline and her husband, he away in the service, lived above their tailor shop with a son and their teenage daughter Lillian. Mrs. Beline first became involved because of 2 Jewish families with whom she'd grown up, by arranging for them to resettle under assumed names in a nearby town. Word traveled fast in the underground, and soon she was trafficking in human cargo, whatever Jews were sent her way. Once, they brought her someone from Eastern Europe. Tova, they said, was her name. Now she would be Gusta, and would share a room with Lillian.
I had never met her before, but I remember well when she first came to us. A lovely dumpling of a woman who didn't speak a word of French, only Polish and Yiddish. which did create a problem in terms of getting papers for her and placing her anywhere.
I said the only thing I can do is to take her in my place, and I took her in my store and told the people that she was one of my niece of the Flemish part of the country, the Belgium country, and that she was staying with me for a while to help in the store. We told the people that she was deaf and mute because she could only speak Yiddish. And if she spoke Yiddish in the store, it was over.
Gusta indeed stayed with us for the rest of the war and pretended for all that time to be a deaf mute. During the night, however, the poor thing had it all bottled up, and she slept in my bedroom. As a matter of fact, in my bed, we had a great big bed, and she would talk my ears off at night. And since I did not know Polish nor Yiddish at the time, I was learning German in school, but it was a point of honor to fail German. It was required, and we were very proud to come home with an F in German at the time. Suddenly, to understand what Gustav was talking about, I became a good German student and acquired a bad reputation in school.
Then she started to learn Yiddish, and Lillian started to make her learn French. And sometimes we did have to go in the bedroom and say, "Shut up, because we can sleep." You know, they were having fun talking to each other and laughing because they couldn't understand everything all the time.
After a few months, it was amazing. I could sing songs in Yiddish with her, and she would confide what her life was in Warsaw, where she came from. And we became the best friends in the world. We were like two sisters, and I must say she did wonders for my Yiddish, German, whatever, to the point where I took the entrance exam to continue my studies in languages, which was English, Dutch, and German. It was a package you had to take. I remember the examiner telling me my German was extremely fluent, but I had somehow a Jewish accent when I spoke German. Tova stayed with us quite a long time, and when she left, it was like losing my sister. And to my great regret, she went to Israel, and I haven't seen her since. I'm not sorry she's in Israel. I'm sorry I haven't seen her.
Mrs. Boleyn, today a widow, lives with Lillian in New Jersey. Her son is in the American Diplomatic Service. Lillian, married, a mother, now Professor Gaffney, lectures on linguistics to teachers at Fairleigh Dickinson. Why did they do it? What prompted them, safe Christians that they were, to jeopardize themselves, their family, their very lives?
All the one I save, I love them all. One person's life is worth a lot to me. Then it didn't matter really, 1 or 30. As much as you could, that's probably why I did so many, because they start to come back to me and back, and I couldn't refuse them to help. It was probably in my heart that I couldn't do it.
You could not live with yourself if because there was some measure of danger, you were ready to sell being a human being because you were in danger. It's at those times you realize that danger may frighten you, but it will not stop you.
So that was a beautiful story. And finally, I'm going to end with Gizzy Fleischman. Why is she so important to my life? Because Gizzy Fleischman was the head of a Jewish rescue group in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia. And it was because of her work and alerting the Jews, particularly the Orthodox Jews of Slovakia, that they had to get out and run and get away as soon as possible, that our family was able to escape. So this is my mom and her twin sister. And this is the man my mom married on top because he thought he was marrying the other twin, but found out that they had exchanged on him. And this is our route of escape in December 1940, starting with Czechoslovakia. We had to get to Lisbon, Portugal, in hiding on the run to board the ship Ciudad de Seville on May 7th, 1941. Here is my manifest. And there is a picture of me before I left Slovakia with my parents, and that picture of my mother. And I wanted to read to you something from my son, who's an attorney in Jacksonville, Florida. And it answers the question of what does the second generation and the third generation think? On February 4th, 2013, I got this email from my son. It was to commemorate the yahrzeit of my mom, who had died previously the year before. Today is the day. I don't have a candle at work, but I set aside a few quiet moments to let the memories flow in. My most vivid memory of her is the first time she told me the story of escaping from Europe. Until then, it always seemed to me that she was just so quiet, almost submissive in her old school European ways. I was probably 11 or 12 when she told me this story. It was riveting. Suddenly, she was powerful and strong in the way she spoke, as she must have been in helping to guide your family through that time. Your son, David. Why did this email touch me so much? Because I never knew that my mom had told him that. And I'm so grateful that she did. Thank you for your time today and for your attention to my presentation. And now I think we have some time to answer some questions. Miata, thank you so much for hosting this. Before I answer any questions, if you're really intrigued by the work that I do, and my job is, my paying job that I still have, is to train all the teachers in South Florida and anywhere in the country that anyone asks me to on how to teach the Holocaust by telling them these stories and by working with Holocaust survivors from all around the country. So if you're intrigued by that, I would ask you to please go into the chat and look at my Institute website. And if you are so up to it, there is a place where you can make a small donation to sponsor a teacher to come to my institutes. I thank you very much for that. I believe the link for donation is a live link. If not, please take a picture of it and find it by Googling. Miata, do we have some questions? Would you like me to look in chat or in Q&A or in chat and see if I can answer them?
I was thinking I would throw them your way. I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing such a moving and personal story. I was really touched in there. And just a reminder to anyone who's still on, they can still submit questions in the Q&A icon at the bottom of their screen. But first up, just in following your story and your time coming to the United States or getting out of Slovakia, do you have a moment that stood out for you as a time when you felt sort of the most scared?
Oh, yes, that's a really excellent question. Yes, there was a moment. We were alone, my dad, my mom, and I, and my infant brother, Ted, who was only 9 months old. We were not with a group. And so we depended on my mother and dad. I was only 5 years old to get us to safety. I had no idea why we were on trains, off trains, darkness, fog, running, hiding, 8 countries, clutching my mother's hand. And there was a moment, to this day I feel it, when we lost my dad. He went on one train and we went on another. And to this day, I can still hear in my ears my mother screaming, Maurice, Maurice, where are you? Where are you? And I thought, I've lost my dad. And then we found him a few hours later. But that was a
My
moment
gosh.
that yeah.
I can't even imagine. But another question that has come in that I think a lot of people are wondering, why have more stories about Jewish women not been publicized? There are plenty of stories that came out of World War II about the men fighting and the battles there, but where do you feel the Jewish women's story has gotten lost?
Where do I what? The last part of
Why
your
do you
question.
feel the Jewish women's story has gotten lost? Why is that story not told?
I just think that the women always played the role of standing back and supporting their men. And certainly, remember, most women were from Europe. For example, my mother. My dad was the lead in the family, and her job was to keep him happy as a rabbi, cook and clean, keep the house. And it wasn't until people started asking her when he wasn't around, Sarah, tell us what happened. That, like my son said, her voice got strong and her other self came by. So probably that's how it was until recently. And as I say, it wasn't until I met Yafa personally and Nakama and Irene. I met a lot of those. I mean, I could do a part 2 of this presentation because I had to skip, as you saw me, a lot. But when I started meeting them and they told me their stories and the academic work that they're doing, that I felt, oh my gosh, this is something I have to include in my curriculum. And so I started work. This is a work in progress. I always add more as I hear. And there are many books out there now. So you just have to Google women in the Holocaust. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Which leads into another question from Lenora. She wants to know, have you written a book about women in the Holocaust?
I have not. If anyone out there, of 470 of you who are left, is a professional writer or publisher, I have not even documented my story in a book because you are going to be very surprised to hear this, all of you. I do not like to write. I like to talk. The only writing I do is when I'm really angry and I just hit the computer and send a letter to the editor, or when I'm forced to do curriculum writing. But I certainly would love to publish. I have a title called Miriam's Journey, and I would just love to find a professional writer who is interested. So how do you reach me? I'm more than happy to have you put my email into the chat, Miriam K10 at AOL. Miriam K, 10, Miriam K10. I welcome all good, beautiful, kind comments. I do not welcome negative or criticism. At this stage of my life, not interested.
Good to know, Miriam. And finally, we have a lot of people who are wondering what happened to the 12 friends that Irene was able to help, and what happened with them after that story. Do you have any background there?
Very little. I should know more, but I have so many books I have to read all the time. So I'm going to tell you right now that she has written a memoir. I can't think of the name of it. Google it. Irene Opdyke, Opdycke, and the entire story is available in a book. To my knowledge, all 12 survived, and they all went on to lead other lives. A lot of Jews, as you know, went to Israel, which is why it's so important that, Israel remain Israel and be the country that we want it to be. But they all survived, and they're all documented in her book. Yes. I'll have to reread it for those questions.
And you're getting started on your own book, rereading her book. There's a lot of work still to be done. Well, thank you so much. That is all the time that we have today. I'd like to once again thank our expert, Dr. Miriam Kassenoff, for her presentation. And if you enjoyed this lecture today, I wanted to let you know that you can take part in a full day or a full week of lectures with Rhodes Scholar experts in our new online Days of Discovery and Adventures Online. Our full days of online discovery take this lecture experience and add an interactive small group discussion and private Q&A with the expert, or opt for the multi-day Adventures Online and engage with multiple days of lectures, performances, discussion, and social hours, really recreating that Rhodes Scholar experience that was in person virtually. We invite everyone to head over to rhodescholar.org/online to learn more. So big thank you to everyone who joined us.
Thank you.
Yes, and as a reminder, please support the virtual lectures by giving, rhodescholar.org/give. Thanks again, Miriam, and you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, and make sure you do put in.
Until next time.
I'm looking at chat, and make sure that Jeffrey puts in the donate link as well, please. The one that opens now, it does not have the donate link. So if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. There are 2 links.
Okay, we'll make sure we can try to get that out to everybody on the back end.
Thank you very much. And
but thanks again to everyone for tuning in. Yeah,
thank you.
Stay safe, stay healthy, stay curious.
Thank
Bye now.
you. Bye, everyone.